Hello and welcome to another episode of Casting Views. And I hesitated for a second because I was going to say an unusual episode of Casting Views. And I'll get onto that in a second. But first, I want to introduce my guest. So it's a return for Griffin from the Reboot Deboot podcast. So hi, Griffin. How you doing?
Hey, how are you?
I'm very good. Pleased to have you back on. I've had a number of comments about your appearance on my show. So you came on and did a mind wipe, didn't you?
Yes.
For me. And firstly, it was the first time we'd spoken and it was just such an entertaining chat. And yeah, I'd had a number of people sort of come back to me and say, yeah, kind of like the passion you were showing for some of the things you were talking about really shone through. So we, or I've been looking at wanting to get you back on. So I'm going to get you on for a dinner party episode. I want to get you on for some normal episodes. And I kind of hesitated because I'll let people into a secret here. So you approached me, didn't you, about the idea for this episode? And I then agreed, but completely got the wrong end of the stick. So you wanted to talk about Oasis, but almost grill me on my podcast. But I thought it was going to be on your podcast. And then, like I said, I was driving home today and I was thinking, but he's a movie podcast. Am I sure I'm appearing on this? So yeah. Well, we'll go into that as well. So you can explain the theory behind the episode. But firstly, let's talk about you. So how have things been for you since you were last on the show?
Well, first, that mind wipe was fantastic. I had a blast. It was just great. And I had a few people actually reached out to me through on Twitter and on Twitch. And they were just like, just listen to the mind wipe. It was really good. And I'm like, hey, thanks you. But aside from that, though, things have been going good. Just doing the streaming stuff, keep growing, building this little empire of art that I'm teetering atop of. I have some other ideas going forward for some future streams, so that's going to be fun. I want to do like a paint stream, but I don't know how to paint. So I figured I'm not sure if it's a rumor or how historically accurate it is, but I remember hearing something about how Picasso, in his later years, would carry around a revolver filled with paint rounds, and he would shoot people in the street, and they would get hit with like an explosion of paint. And I'm like, man, Picasso is kind of a dick. But at the same time, I'm like, what if I did that on a canvas? Like, what if I did that on a full-size canvas at a distance? So I'm toying around with this idea, and I want to do 12 paint canvases with all munitions, and then I want to donate them to an art gallery or something and have it be one for each month.
It'd be literally performance art then.
Yeah, that would be, and like cooking streams and stuff like that. And then the podcast, we've kind of hit a slow point because co-host Alex, he is currently vacationing with family, so he's like, we're gonna skip a couple of weeks because I got to go here and then I have to go here, and I'm like, take all the time you need. It's really informal anyway. So we're kind of in a little bit of a hiatus right now.
And again, I'll put the links in the show notes, but people can still get more of you from the books you've published, self-published, and your Twitch stream, right? So keep eyes on that, yeah. And potentially what you're going to create on these canvases. So keep us updated on that.
Definitely.
Yeah, you're going to be only the second person, I think, that's ever turned the tables on me. And I've always said that I'm always glad to be this side of the microphone. But it's all come flooding back to me that, you wanted to kind of turn the tables. So talk to me about what your thought was for this episode.
So during my mind wipe, we came across that you have a love for Oasis. And, I love music. It's one of my big passions that I really care about. And I love when I find out, I love when people talk about music they like too. And you can tell the difference between someone who just, I like music, and someone who's like, no, I love this band. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. So when you were like, I saw your eyes kind of flicker a little bit at the mention of Oasis, and then you're like, yeah, they're my favorite band. And I'm like, it always amazes me because music is such an emotional and evocative thing for people. it transcends years and events, and it's always there and in some way, shape, or form. So when someone has a favorite band, I'm always interested to know, like, why are they your favorite band? Have you ever seen them? What do these albums mean to you? Because also, anyone can listen to an album, anyone can listen to a band. But I found that with people who have, like, when they're talking about their favorite band, they resonate to the music in a way that not most people do. Like they have a special understanding of, oh, well, this one album has this one lyric, and at this time it meant the world, and we're like, this entire song and the way it was constructed. And usually, if you're a fan like that, you also start doing research on how the album was produced or where the band were at in their lives, and you start to get this understanding of what it took to make this album that has a special place in your heart. And I know Oasis have had some turmoil over the years internally. So for you to be an Oasis fan, I'm like, oh, this has got to be a gold mine of like musical evolution and personal growth. Because also Oasis weren't just writing throwaway lyrics, you know?
And that's one of the things. I will always be a defender of them, and I'm sure we'll discuss this. Their lyrics aren't necessarily, people will look down on their lyrics. People will look down on the chords,
Sure.
or the simpleness. But I don't see what a problem with that is. People keep saying, oh, that all the songs sound the same, but then you tell me how many bands really do reinvent themselves for every album. And I'll always challenge that their songs sound the same, because they do some very different. There's almost some comedy songs as well as some sort of
Sure.
ballads, some love songs, as well as what they're known for. And the Beatles accusation, well, they've never shied away from that. And again,
Right.
show me another band who hasn't got an influence from someone in the past. So yeah, I've got some thoughts on this as well. But I mean, we found out about you in your previous appearance that you've got a very British sort of streak to you as well, sort
Sure.
of through your
Yeah.
upbringing. So, what about you with Oasis? Were they a band that featured in your upbringing, or your history, should I say?
So I want to address the comment first about like the same, every song sounds the same, or it's the same chord progression. No one complained about AC/DC. No one complained about Status Quo. So there's that argument. Like, didn't Status Quo make an album called "Searching for the Fourth Chord"? Like, so I like it's, if it works, keep doing it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there are some bands who can get away with that. But I also think you can have your detractors with Oasis and a lot of their music. But when you get to Noel Gallagher as a songwriter, the conversation becomes a little more serious. And I think when I was a kid, my mom was a huge music fan. And I remember definitely maybe in What's the Story Morning Glory being on heavy rotation in the mid to late 90s. I like very distinctly remember Don't Look Back in Anger as like a very formative song in that time. Along with, like, same thing with like Alice in Chains, Nine Inch Nails, Primus, Mother Love Bone. Like, it was just that thing. And Oasis happened, they were right there.
So for me, if I talk about then how I got introduced to them, so obviously being in England at the time, it was right at the start. So for
Were you
me,
mad for it?
yeah. Well, the funny thing is, if you knew me at that time, that age, I was totally the opposite of being mad for it,
Oh,
So
okay.
I was at school. So what was their debut album? I think was 94, right? So
So, yes, definitely maybe hit shelves April 1994.
yes. So I was 17. No, April. So I would have been, 16. So I remember being so at school here in the UK, so you've got your kind of like your upper schools. So that's, well, it was then, I don't know what it is now, but it was between, say, the ages of 11 and 15. And then at that point, you could either stay on for a couple more years to do what we call A levels, or you could
Mm-hmm.
go to college, etc. And so I stayed on at my school to do A levels. And well, yeah, when this is a complete diversion, but when you're doing A levels, you're kind of, and I'm doing the quotes to you, but for everyone at home, you're treated more as an adult, as they say. And so you get a room, like a common room, where you can chill out between classes, right? Between
Okay.
lessons. I remember coming into that room one day, and there was again, for all the young ones out there, we had a tape player.
Sure.
And a friend of mine, he had an album, he had a tape, so a cassette tape. And I don't know if you remember back in the day, the cassette tapes, you get the inlays and the bands would normally put like the lyrics or photos and you'd fold it out. And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And he goes, "Oh, it's a band called Oasis." So I'll be honest, it's not like I was there day one waiting for that album to release. And I remember him playing it, and I just got hooked straight away on that guitar, that kind of that rock sound and that at the time that rawness of the guitar. Now, what I'll say is, and at some point next year, I'm actually going to do a month on Britpop, so I might get you on for that.
Stone Roses, Blur,
Yeah.
Oasis, like it's that, yeah. It's because in the 90s at the same time, America was going through a massive grunge movement. England, though, you guys had this wave of like it's called Britpop, but if you're unfamiliar with the term, it isn't necessarily it's alternative music. It's what you could comfortably call alternative music. But there was a definite like shoegazy grit to it that was like we're leaving the 80s behind us and this is our 90s alternative scene, and it was Blur, Stone Roses, and Oasis, I think, definitely spearheaded that movement further.
Yeah, I mean, I was big into the indie scene. I loved all those bands. And as you said, yeah, Britpop is probably a bit of a misnomer of a description because it wasn't often pop. It was like rock and, as you said, alternative. Now, what I would say is most of the bands at the time, the artists at the time were, I've been trying to work out today how to call them, but it was quite thoughtful music. It was almost a lot of it. Like you had Blur, you had Suede, who were quite. Their music was almost, I want to say, like cinematic, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
It was like very orchestral, very sweeping. And then Oasis came along, and we play the guitars and we sing loud and we're going to do it well. Do you know what I mean? There's no pretense with them. There was no pretentiousness, even though there was this swagger and this attitude, which, yeah, we'll speak about. I think that's another thing that I found refreshing about it because they did sound different to the rest. Some of these may mean something to some people, but like, yeah, we had Elastica, Shed 7, Menswear, which you said were like the very shoegazy for that term. Even Ash, who I love as well, kind of a bit more of the rock, but also a little bit the
Ash do There's a Light That Never Goes Out. Wasn't that Ash?
Well, their main album, 1977. So that had like Kung Fu, Girl from Mars, Angel Interceptor. It was really the first album I was probably more into. But then also, we had the scene like it's not, they won't be classed under Britpop, but in the 90s, well, we had Prodigy, who I'm still a huge fan of as well. Just like for me, I think where Prodigy was that rawness, that sound, that does, and I think Liam was a genius in terms of his sampling. I just thought these two brothers, they came along, like I said, no airs, no pretenses, no we're artists and this and that. They just said, no, we're gonna play songs that are gonna rock you. Do you know what I mean?
It's interesting because that's exactly what was happening here in the 90s, but with the grunge movement. We had new wave, we had Flock of Seagulls and Aha, and then you had the hair metal, you had Poison Rat. A little like towards like 90s, you had Warrant with Cherry Pie, and then out of nowhere you get Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Nirvana, and they are so aesthetically different in their songs and their songwriting and in their sound that we're leaving behind the glam and glitter, we're leaving behind the fast cars, we're leaving behind the women, we're leaving behind the drugs. We're gonna just talk about alienation, we're gonna talk about our depression, and we're gonna talk about what matters in our shitty little apartments. And it was interesting that again, across the pond, it was the same sentiment expressed in two different ways.
I think that's it. I think I was going to say a lot of the bands at the time, and again, I don't mean this in too much of a derogatory way, but were very pretty bands, if you know what I mean. They were there and they were quite stylized. But as I said, they were just two boys from Manchester who wanted to be the biggest singer. And that's the other thing, love it or loathe it. A lot of bands, try to be humble or try to be, oh no, we're here for the music. They just wanted to be the biggest band in the world at the time, right? And again, I think you've got to respect that because that they wanted to be the band that everyone talks about, right?
So Definitely Maybe was recorded February 1993. It was released August 29th, 1994. So the first time you heard that album, you were doing your A levels, you were 16. Do you remember what your initial, like, did you go out and buy the tape afterwards? Did you start asking around? Did you borrow the tape from your friend? Where did you go from that moment? Did you listen to the entire tape there?
Yeah, I did, and I bought the tape straight away. You know, this was back in the day where, you know, you had your high street shops that did stock like the top 40, 50 albums of the day, and you had to have physical media. So yeah, I remember buying it, and like I said, I kind of was that person that pored over every detail on the inlay, you know, opening it up, looking at the pictures, and it's not the most, you know, the cover is them in that living room, right? And it's not the most, it's a very simple picture, but it's got those details that make you keep wanting to look at it.
It's also because, I mean, it's the way Guy Ritchie made his first two movies. It's very washed out and high lit. If you look at
Yeah.
the Definitely Maybe, it's the band in that little living room. Noel is laying down, or is it Liam? One of the brothers is laying down, and the whole thing is super washed out. And it looks like the new phase of modern art. Like, it looks like something Andy Warhol would have created. You know, it has this very high concept with simple design theory to it. And then if you watch again, like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels or Snatch, Guy Ritchie almost emulates that with his high washout movies. You know.
And again, I will say they're simple covers. Even we'll talk about What's the Story, Morning Glory, with the blurred picture of the two people walking down the street, and Be Here Now, which has just got a plethora of things going on that cover, right? You know, the swimming pool, the bike, the car. I think it's a Rolls, isn't it, in the swimming pool?
Yeah.
It's, again, they've got enough just to keep the interest going. So they're not saying they're artists or breaking that fourth wall, whatever, but they are just giving you enough to draw your attention into it. And as I said, I think it was just hearing that raw guitarness, because as I said, I was into the indie scene, and it, you know, it was guitar driven, but it was just, like I said, just felt like it was amped up on Definitely Maybe. It felt raw. It felt dirty, almost like a dirty
Mhm.
sound.
Do you have any favorite tracks from Definitely Maybe?
I will say here that it's definitely, definitely maybe, it's definitely one. It's an album that I can listen to first track to last track without skipping. That's, for me, that's a sign of a great album. But for me, it's Live Forever and Supersonic. Those are, well, Live Forever, Supersonic, and Slide Away, I would say, are my stand-up ones.
Okay, it's all solid, all really solid choices. And for a debut album, it is. It's interesting trying to talk about Definitely Maybe an Oasis, considering where they're at now, and considering how everyone considers Oasis, you know. But talking about it as if the other albums and if the legacy wasn't established, trying to go, oh, I mean, it's good for a first album because they're just a little indie band and they were able to do that. But yeah, they were just a little indie band and they were able to do that. Like, it's quite an accomplishment.
And if you think that the Nebworth gig came after just their second album, the speed at which they achieved that fame and that level of success is, to me, what's phenomenal. And again, you can't take that away from them.
There's that. Is it Nebworth where it's a concert footage? I'm pretty sure it's got to be Nebworth, and Liam is there and he's like shaking cables and he's yelling, "Are you mad for it?" right into the camera, and he's got his John Lennon glasses on.
I'm not sure if it's
And
Nebworth. It might be, they did a few at like the Manchester before that. It could be there.
like he's in like a velvet or like suede purple or dark blue jacket, and he just looks young and he looks so energetic, but he's also just so above arrogant in that moment because he knows that right now they're on top of the world, you know? Like,
Yeah. And also, one thing I will say, especially about the early days, because what I'll say is, for me, the first three albums are peak Oasis, right? And I remember kind of not falling away, but the following albums, and then I think it was Standing on the Shoulder of Giants. I really enjoyed that. Then I kind of thought it, you know, life and stuff gets in the way. And I remember at the time thinking I didn't enjoy them as much. But over the years, I've realised that I think every album of theirs, I think is a great album, but nothing could replace, and I say it, the meteoric rise of the first two albums, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing I will say about them is, this was in a time as well where an album would get released and a band would release usually 4 singles. And so you would buy the singles as well. And the
Right.
singles would often have a couple of songs. Now, Oasis were,
B-sides and unreleased, and yeah.
Yeah, now Oasis were one of the bands where often, and this sounds negative, but it's not, the B-sides were often better than some of the songs that were on the album. And it's incredible that they would do that. They would keep those as B-sides.
And it's usually, I mean, that comes down to like an A&R man being like, I can't go on the album, it's going to make it too long. Or try and save that and we can turn it into another hit somewhere down the line. And then the album comes out, and then, okay, well, what are we going to do with these 5 tracks that we have? Stick them on the single and put it a B-side.
Yeah, I mean, Half the World Away was a B-side. Fade Away was a B-side. The Master Plan was a B-side. These are
right.
These are probably songs that are in people's top 10 Oasis songs, right? And they were B-sides. Rocking Chair for me, I think, was on Roll With It. Again, one of my favourite songs of theirs was a B-side. And it's like some people may never have heard these songs if they just bought the album. Right. So again, it's like, I would say, maybe not the confidence, but it just shows the level of output they were doing at the time, especially in the early days, how many songs that Noel especially had in his head that he was able to get out and record like that. I think it was just phenomenal.
So Definitely Maybe was August 1994. Dan, where were you while we were getting high? Because October 1995 would bring us What's the Story, Morning Glory. So did you ever see Oasis? You went out, you bought the tape, you bought Definitely Maybe. Did you ever see them on the Definitely Maybe tour at all?
No. So I was at Nebworth 96, which we'll obviously come on to, but there's between Definitely Maybe and What's the Story, Morning Glory, there is something else that I need to say there. So I turned 18 in 95.
Okay.
And me and my family went to Italy. Now, normally, because my family are Italian, we would normally go to our family over there. But this year, or that year, sorry, we went to another place. We said, instead of going to see family, we went to Sorrento. We did a week there. And while I was there in the hotel, I made friends with some other British teens that were there at the time.
Sure.
I had my Oasis tape with me because, we all had our Walkmans back then, and I was listening to it. And I remember we went to a bar one night, and I'll never forget because it was called Chaplin's, even though it was in Italy, it was called Chaplin's Pub. I was sitting with my back to the bar. There was 3 of us, and there was 3 opposite. And one of them says to me, "Oh, do you like Oasis?" I said, "Well, let me tell you this, I said, when we get back to the hotel, I'll give you the album." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Because the guy behind us, on the table behind us, looks like Noel from Oasis." So I thought, I was expected to turn around and see somebody that looked nothing like him, right? Turned round, I thought, bloody hell, that's him. That's Noel. And they were saying, "No, it can't be. Why would he be here?" And I said, "No, it's Noel." And then there was like 6 of us 18-year-old Brits, sort of pointing and giggling at him and sort of like that. And I then started feeling a bit uncomfortable because he's there with his girlfriend at the time having a drink. And we all finish ours and they get up to go. And I said, "I can't leave without knowing if that's him or not." Right? And the thing is, right, the other thing to know about me is, at the time, I liked talking to people, but I was actually quite shy. I was quite an introvert at the time. And so I said, "Right, I'm going over." So I went to go over. I turned around and the other people, they'd all run out. They were too embarrassed. So they'd left me alone in there, right? So I went up to him and I said, look, "I'm really sorry. I know we've been pointing and pretended to take pictures of ourselves, because these were, again, in the day before the smartphone, right? So we had like cameras taking pictures.
You had the point and shoot plastic, wooden camera. Yeah.
Yeah, and what we were trying to do was pretend to take a photo of one of us, but at the last second quickly turn it, right? Which meant all the photos were ruined, right? But that's another thing.
And also, the flash, too. That is really...
So I said to him, I went over and I said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but no, right?" And he sort of smiled and laughed. And look, the reason I also knew it was him, because his girlfriend at the time, because as it is now, even back then, husbands, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends were just as big news as the celebrity, right? And I recognised her. And I said, "Look," I I just want to say, look, obviously a huge fan. And he goes, do you want a picture? And I said, yeah, all right. So I sort of, his girlfriend moved and I said, you're all right, do you mind moving? Sort of thing. So how rude. So he said, no, do you want a picture? And so I sat between him. The other people then saw this, so they came running back in. And yeah, so I can say I had a drink with Noel because I'd finished the drink. And to this day, though, right, I only had one picture that came out and I can't find it. For the life of me, I can't find it. I know, I should have framed it, but I've moved houses a number of times.
Sure.
I've got his autograph because I did have, weirdly, again, because back in the day, you didn't have a smartphone. So phone numbers and stuff like that, I had a little
something.
I had a phone book. Yeah, I had a little phone book, like a streamline. I got him to sign that. And so I've still got that.
Man, you encountered Noel like 94 to 90. That is an awesome encounter.
And, because he was saying, I said, oh, look, what's next? What's next? And he said, oh, the album's coming out in a few months' time. And yeah, it's just, that will always be something, obviously, I'll remember because it was just such a chance happening. And,
sure.
And like, oh, that is him. And then they all ran out and left me.
They left you. But, I mean, it worked out, right?
Yeah.
Like, they left you, and as you were walking out, they were like, and you're like, yeah, I had a drink. He's a nice guy. Something's coming out.
But yeah, so now it's always when we do icebreakers. Yeah, I've had a drink with Noel. Yeah.
No, I like the first name implication.
Yeah.
Me, Sorrento 95. Yeah, it's fine.
But sort of back to your question. So this is the thing now. So buying these albums as well, then is, and again, pun not intended, but is a bit of a blur. And I think it would have been CDs then. I definitely was a cassette, but then from then on it was CDs.
The era of the CD had more or less killed tapes.
Yeah, and for me, What's the Story Morning Glory then just proper amped up or really cemented the fact that, this is our sound. And whether it's a better album than the first or not, you can debate, because I think the first album has got that rawer sound. This is much more slick, much more produced album, I think.
I mean, and yeah, like Champagne Supernova in all of its like 7.5 minutes of glory. And I know, like if you say Oasis, the first thing people think of, I know, is Wonderwall. Also on What's the Story, and Don't Look Back in Anger, and the Swamp Song, or like, I get it, Noel. Like you have the capability. So when What's the Story came out, I'm assuming by now you would listen to Definitely Maybe down to the bones, and you had to buy a new copy because the old one was just destroyed for how much you listened to it. So when What's the Story comes out, what were you hoping for? Were you hoping for more of the same? Were you like, did you hear it first on the radio, or were you like day one in a store buying it, racing home to put it on? And where were you at in your life when What's the Story came out?
So, What's the Story was, what did we say? It was 95, wasn't it? So
October 2nd, 1995.
October 2nd, 95. So then I would have just turned 18. Yeah, I probably at that point I would have finished school and went to my 2 years at college then were probably two of the best years of my youth. Because school is one of those things you just have to get through, right? Whereas college then, it's a different atmosphere. It's far more relaxed, and you can pick and choose who you kind of talk to, as it were. But obviously, music is one of those things that you're constantly talking about. And I just remember falling in with a group of people that were very similar tastes as well. But it was still, even then, probably all my friends were probably a bit more American biased. So they were more into the rock, like the Smashing Pumpkins, etc. The alternative things like
Jane's
that.
Addiction, Smashing Pumpkins, yeah.
And even for me, I mean, Nirvana obviously still was, loomed big at the time as well in terms of their legacy. But yeah, I remember being at college, being a bit more sort of outgoing at the time. But in terms of what I wanted, I think at the time I wanted more of the same, but I was quite pleased to hear that they had evolved a little bit, like in the sense of, like I said, Champagne Supernova, I think for me is probably the best track on that. Just because it is that really trippy 7-minute, just lie down, lie back and just close your eyes and just hear that. And I remember me and a friend, we would go to the pub on a Thursday night, whatever, because it was probably because it was a cheap night then. We'd stick a couple of quid in the jukebox. Yeah, we would stick a couple of quid in the jukebox, and we would always pick the longest songs to get the most money.
Most out of your money, yeah.
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 And Champagne Supernova was always on there as well because it's 7.5 minutes long, right? But even that, like, I remember my wife at the time. I've kind of turned her into a massive Oasis fan. But Champagne Supernova was that sort of song that she liked as well, because it's just that layer and of that music just kind of washes over you, doesn't it? And it just kind of hypnotizes you.
It's also deceptive because when you first hear if you've never heard Champagne Supernova, the first time you listen to it, you're going to think, oh, this is such a pretty, beautiful song. The composition is nice. It's like a nice, sweet little ballad. But then if you really get into the lyrics, it's really depressing.
Yeah.
Like it really is a goodbye to youth. It really is like it's almost a remembrance for the times that we had. It's almost like Stand By Me or American Graffiti. Like, you can't go back. The entire thing is draped in drug use and excess, but like the depression that it causes, or like the friends that you lose away because of that lifestyle, and coupled within how like pretty this song sounds, you have this beautiful melody for like, this is one of the most tragic and beautiful pieces of music that was created. It's also strange for like a Britpop band or like an indie band to come out with a 7-minute juggernaut of a song. Like that's something from the, like Zeppelin would do a 7-minute song. Queen would do a 7-minute song. Hocus Pocus, Jethro Tull. You don't have a band in the 90s doing like some prog rock juggernaut that just doesn't seem to end. And out of nowhere, Oasis, Noel was like, no, we're going to.
And again, their second album, right?
Yeah, their second album.
To have as I say, to have the balls to do that, and it be probably, like I said, my favourite song on there. I mean, obviously at the time, Wonderwall, I'm not going to lie, I loved it. And Don't Look Back in Anger, obviously great song. But for me, I think they were just overplayed, and they have been overplayed. So that's why I'm not going to say I don't like them. But if you're asking me my top songs, often they won't feature just because, they're just so overplayed.
It's also too easy to pick them. Like, what's the greatest song of all time? Bohemian Rhapsody, Stairway to Heaven. Like, yes, we are comfortable picking these songs, and no one will debate them. But let's look further. Let's get away from, we know they're classics. They've earned their place. No one can ever debate that. But there's more room than just what we have. It's easy to make the joke about Wonderwall now. Oh, my girlfriend asked me to stop playing Wonderwall. I said maybe. You can make these jokes all day long, but to actually listen to these albums and to hear the composition of them and think, okay, if you think it's so easy to make something like Wonderwall, you do it.
Yeah.
If you think, and then do it and do that 6 more times on an album.
Yes. It's like I said, I will always think fondly of them, but those songs. But as you said, maybe too easy now. I mean, again, looking at the track list, for me, it's definitely Champagne Supernova. I mean, She's Electric is one of the ones, like I said to you, is one of those fun songs.
Sure.
It's just that different kind of melody. But also, Some Might Say, I think, is a great song.
Mm-hmm.
But, they this album, the main talking point around it was Roll With It. So, the battle they had with Blur. So,
right.
Did that make it over to the States?
Partially, but so I'm a little younger, so I don't remember much of the time then. Like, I was born in 87. So come 97, I'm 10, right? So I'm like 8 or 9. So I'm remembering hearing these bands and these albums and these CDs from my mom or her coworkers. Looking back as I got older, I remember people talking about Oasis versus Blur, and I did some digging at the time, and I'm like, that was definitely more of a British rivalry. It didn't ever really come out, like, that argument never crossed over into the Americas. I'm sure in the fan communities it did. I'm sure you had people here who were like, well, they're Blur, but the overall media, I don't think it was ever a fight, because I think that outside of Song 2, America had always written Blur off. I don't think that they ever got the proper respect as musicians in a band as they did, like they deserved. I think it was purely Oasis, and every time a hit would come out from Oasis, they always took the British air out of the room, and the rest was like, here are the five Seattle, like here are the five grunge bands, and then Oasis, and then here's Smashing Pumpkins, and then Oasis, and that's what the tone was.
See, now I think the first couple of Blur albums were great, but I wasn't necessarily a Blur fan.
Well,
but
you
I
were an
like
Oasis
the music.
fan.
Yeah, but I like the music. I'm not one of these, I can't listen to that. I appreciate some of their really early stuff and some of their later stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like This Is a Low, Beetle Bum, song 2 as well.
Sure.
You can't deny that's a great song. But yeah, a quick recap. So Blur were 4 albums in at the time, and obviously it was Oasis second, and Oasis obviously were giving it all that. The Gallagher Brothers were giving it all that, saying they're better than Blur. So I think it was August. I could be wrong, but I think it was roughly August. Oasis were going to release Roll With It as a single. So Blur moved their single Country House to release the same day, the same week. So it was then obviously the press get hold of it, and it's a battle of Britpop, and Blur won that. Now, if I'm going to be, defend Oasis, I think if I remember right, Blur had more variations of the CD, so fans had more reason to buy multiple instances of the song. But I'm not getting petty here. The wounds have healed. The crazy thing is, right, I mean, Roll With It is a good song. It's not a great song. But again, what I was saying to you earlier, so the B-side on Roll With It was Rocking Chair. And for me, that's one of their best songs. If that had been the A-side, I think you might have seen a different
you think so?
a different result. For me, again, it's incredible that I'm sitting here saying that, people should have bought that for the B-side rather than the A-side.
Yeah, like, I remember my mom having Blur's, like, again, I remember the tapes. I remember the first 2 Blur album, like, tape cassettes. I remember those both because she had them in her collection, and I remember she had like 3 or 4 Oasis albums. But the argument of like Blur and Oasis has always been funny to me because I can't ever. Looking back now, it seems so funny. And do you remember that Father Ted episode where they made that joke too?
Oh no, do you know what? I never watched that show.
They make a reference to it in Father Ted when they have that whole argument of, who do you prefer, Oasis or Blur? And someone responds incorrectly, quote unquote.
Yeah. Again, they were 2 totally different bands. I think Blur were more the, as I was trying to say at the start, they were more the arty kind of band, if you know what I mean. I think they tried to do a lot more with their videos. They were trying to be a lot more clever. But, they were different bands. And I think the thing I didn't like, though, at the time with that album, so Part Life and Country House, I think it was that mock Cockney kind of thing. And I think that turned me off a little bit against that particular album. But again, Part Life is a great album.
Well, I mean, one of, like, to talk about, like, artistic, and one of the members of Blur became the Gorillaz.
Yeah, Damon Albarn. Yeah,
Damon. Yeah. So, like, if you listen to Blur and then you listen to the Gorillaz, it makes a whole lot of sense. Because, like, the quirkiness is there, the humor is there, the musicianship is very high, but also it's almost like tongue-in-cheek, which is kind of what Blur... I feel like Blur have this layer of tongue-in-cheek throughout their music.
Yeah,
even on, like, the more serious stuff.
Yeah. I just found it was funny that that's who they were pit against, really. But Blur, I almost said unfortunately, and now I'm going to alienate a whole fan base. But no, Blur won the Battle of Britpop at that time.
Okay. Don't let Noel hear that. He'll or Liam, I guess. So 1997, August 21st, Be Here Now. Oasis have achieved, like, the top of the mountain with the first 2 albums behind them. Be Here Now comes out. The album artwork still fits in the theme. How were you leading up to this? Were you like excited for another Oasis album? Had you seen them yet? Like, where were you at?
I was really hyped for this one. So the year before was Nebworth, right? So 96, Nebworth was 96, and I haven't been to many gigs, but I went to that, and I will forever hold that as one of my favourite memories. Now, I almost didn't go because no one in my immediate sort of vicinity particularly liked Oasis, right? Now, I had a friend then, somebody I did know at school, who I hadn't seen for a couple of years, but we kept in touch. He was the weird thing, he was a budding DJ, and he liked the techno and the rave and the dance, but he wanted to go because he knew it was going to be one of those events right now. It was being touted one of the biggest things. So if I remember right, it was 125,000 people for 2 nights, so 250,000 people, right?
And for people who don't know, Nebwith is a massive, massive stadium.
Well, it's just an open air. It's basically an open. Yeah, it's not a stadium. It's an open field. It's so there's a stately home there, and it's just land. It's just owned by this guy. And they did do concerts before. Like I think Queen have played there. Subsequently, Robbie Williams has played there. But it's just a massive open area of lands, and it was near where he used to live as well. Now it's well, I'll say it's down the road from me. It's about a 20-minute drive from where I live. So again, it was local, right? And we'll come around to this at some point because obviously Oasis they've announced a tour just recently, haven't they? I think they're doing a couple of gigs, small gigs somewhere.
Yeah, secret shows and pubs.
Yeah, which if anyone's got tickets and can let me have them, please get in touch. So he wanted to go, but back in the day then, again, it was being on the phone. There was no Ticketmaster, there was no internet. That it was either local record shops, which had a selection, or on the phone. So I remember he and I both on the phone. And again, because, we had mobiles and we could text each other, but we couldn't let each other know. So we were just constantly ringing. And what we said is the minute someone could get tickets, just let the other one know. And I think I got through and got 2 tickets for the Sunday, and that was it then. And this is why, again, Oasis will kind of be special to me, because I'll never forget that morning being driven to my mate's house, because he did live near to Nebworth, and my dad and my uncle, because they were going to go somewhere else, visit family, but they were taking me, and I remember just sitting in the back of that car being so hyped to go see Oasis, and my dad driving me to see my mate, and That's just one of those memories.
They made that a live album a couple of years ago, didn't they? They released it?
Yeah, which I got as well. And there's also a film. I think over here it's on Paramount. I think it's on Paramount Plus. But yeah, they did a documentary on it. You can't spot me in it, unfortunately.
Do you now? I'm assuming you listened to the Nebworth album.
Yes, yeah.
Did it take you back to that night?
Absolutely. It's again, it sounds silly, but it was a proper goosebump moment. And just watching the film as well, because even though it's 96, it's almost 30 years ago,
right?
But the cars and the fashion are so different as well, and again, that's a moment in time.
It's interesting, anything from that 90s era, like if you look at MTV like Summer Break, or you look at like the movie Singles, or anything, just there are these little snapshots of like, oh, this is the 90s, this is what it looked like, this is what it sounded like. It's such a strange thing to have this. I remember it, and then there are movies like Encino Man, and there's like Alice in Chains music videos, and like a John Cusack movie, or like High Fidelity, and it's like that's the way that I remember the world from my childhood. But it seems so far away now because everything seems so modern and technological compared to then. But it's only 30 years ago, like
it's incredible. And I don't feel like I've aged 30 years, but then when I look at that, I realize how far away it was. And, and I was just looking at set list now, and, they played 20 songs. That included two encores, of which one was Champagne Supernova.
Of course, which I'm sure they stretched out to like 14 minutes.
Yeah, which was amazing. And so I never forget that day. We walked there, and it was almost about an hour walk, because we weren't going to drive there. So we walked there, and it was blazing hot sun, because it was I think it was August the 10th, and people were getting treated for heat stroke on the way in. But then I remember on the way out, as they started playing like Champagne Supernova and the fireworks going off, it started raining. So we were walking out in the rain, in the field, in the dark, And yeah, the final song was I Am the Walrus. But
of course.
And just for people, so this was pretty much an all-day event. I think it started at 11 a.m. There were a number of bands. This was the thing. I wanted to go on the Saturday, because Saturday had The Prodigy and Ocean Colour Scene. I don't know if Ocean Colour Scene hit. and I really like them. But I got tickets for the Saturday, so we had that again was a lot of the indie bands, and so there was Cast, Cooler Shaker, the Charlatans, who are again one of my favourite bands as well.
Wow.
I love the Charlatans, so at least I got to see them. And Manic Street Preachers.
Richie James was still there then.
Was he?
Right?
He probably would have been.
Yeah, that's before the disappearance.
Now, again, some people, the gasp. I wasn't necessarily a fan of Manic Street Preachers before then, but hearing them live, I honestly think some bands, when you hear them live, that's when you get it.
Sure.
And again, I feel sorry for them. I felt sorry for them in the sense of they were just on before Oasis, and at that point, everyone just wanted Oasis to come
right.
on. They'd been standing up all day. But I just remember coming away from that thinking, I just love them. They sound brilliant live.
I am addicted to that song Slash and Burn. It's so good. And that's a rare band to see, considering.
Yes.
So that's really cool that you have the Charlatans and Manic Street Preachers at the legendary Oasis gig.
Yeah, all for £22.50. So that was the one thing I wanted to say. £22.50. So
that's almost criminally cheap now,
Well, when you think the cheapest tickets I think they were doing now at Wembley were £130, it's something. But yeah, just a phenomenal day. Now, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say I was right at the front. I mean, there was 120,000 people, but it's just when you see the pictures now. So like if you look at the album they released, just to see the picture overhead, it's just amazing. All those people there for that one band. And then you then tell me that they weren't the biggest band sort of at the time.
Sure. Hasn't that been hasn't someone tried to say they had the most, and then Noel hired someone to count Liam hired someone to go in and count the heads at the crowd individually?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Wasn't that a rumor, or wasn't that a thing he used to boast about?
Possibly. Something. I mean, it sounds like the sort of thing he would do. But so obviously there was that, and that'll always be a special memory. But yeah, Be Here Now. The funny thing about that then as well was in the States, I'm not sure, but because the internet really still wasn't a massive thing,
sure,
you would get little inserts in the CDs to join the fan club of bands. And I remember joining the Oasis one. So Be Here Now, and I've got it somewhere, and it's not been treated brilliantly, unfortunately, but I got a limited edition double vinyl version of that through the fan club.
Ooh.
So yeah, so I was really hyped for that album. Yeah, so this was probably outside of picking up the first album. I think I was really amped up to get this, having just come off Nebworth, basically.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, was your dad, because you said your dad took you to Nebworth, was he an Oasis fan, or was he just I'm going to take my kid because he's my kid? And
he just dropped me off. I don't think he was an Oasis fan, but like I said, it was funny because I didn't really have, like I said, around me anyone who was proper into it like I was. Now, Be Here Now, I think is again, it's another funny album. I still think definitely maybe still wins in terms of song 1 to the end song. Listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Be Here Now, you can definitely hear them trying to do different things, different styles on it. And for me, if I had to pick my top song, I mean, Do You Know What I Mean is one of my favourite songs of theirs as well. I just love the opening of that with the helicopter sound coming in. Stand By Me, which is one of the times, I don't know if you've seen the videos to that, is where they've actually done quite a clever video to it.
I haven't.
Yeah, if you watch it, it's one I always would say people to watch. It's almost like there's it's all done through CCTV footage, and it just looks like a lot of terrible things happening. But I won't say anything. Yeah, go watch it and then let me know. What you think of it. Yeah. But then you've got All Around the World, which is almost, I think, this album's version of Champagne Supernova, where it's melodic. I mean, the original, because there's a reprise version of it, but it's 9 minutes 20 seconds, right?
Right, I'm looking at it. That album that already has some longer songs on it. There are tracks on that, Be Here Now. There are some tracks that are 8 minutes, and 9 minutes on there for All Around the World, and that had some some epics. I'll use the term for.
So you could see that I think that's where Noel is getting into is, I'm going to really just let his vision almost come out. I'm going to do this 7-minute song. You're going to listen to it. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And also, it's the third album, and knowing what they've done with the first two and coming off of Nebwith, who's going to tell them no?
Yeah.
It's you have a young band who are hungry, who are still creatively there. Is there any inner turmoil between the brothers at this point in time, or are they still riding that beautiful crest?
I think here they're still riding the crest, yeah.
So yeah, like at that point, why not just go swing for the fences? They had nothing to lose.
The only thing is, I think here, especially on this album, if I remember right, you've got more of Noel taking the lead on vocals, I think.
Sure.
I know he did it on the last album, obviously, Don't Look Back in Anger, but again, it's hard putting myself back into that time frame. But yeah, I remember at the time that he was getting more kind of like vocals, starting to do a bit more vocals.
Usually, this is kind of lessened now, I think, but this is back when a band would do an album, a world tour, which really meant Japan, the UK, and then America, maybe like a South America leg, and then they would go back and do another album and then repeat that process. So really, throughout the 90s, Oasis, like we have 94, 95, 97, 98, like every year, every 2 years, there's a new Oasis album coming out. Like and you can see them. It's that crazy kind of work ethic where it's like they're burning themselves dry, but they're also young enough to where their bodies just, we're not going to sleep. We're going to do this. We got to tour. We got to make another album. We got to tour. We got to make another album. And they have the ability to do it.
And that's the thing, right? And again, I know they've got a lot of detractors, but as you said, they produced 4 albums in 5 years, right? 5-6 years, and throw in Nebworth in the middle of that. I think they had the right to kind of do what they wanted to do at that point.
Sure. Yeah. So 97, Be Here Now, again, November 2nd, 1998 would be The Master Plan. So in your stage of life, you're like a dedicated Oasis fan. You're in the fan club. Did the fan club have a name? Like, was it something quirky?
No, I think it was just like a mailing list, but I think they then sort of called it was like an official, unofficial sort of fan club. But yeah, you just got on the mailing list and they would say, new albums coming out, this or that, or singles in the charts.
My stepdad was a member of the Aerosmith fan club, and they called that Aero Force One.
And of course they would, yeah.
Kiss had the Kiss Army, and you got your little Kiss Army ID card, and so I was wondering if Oasis had anything quirky like that. So November 2nd, 1998, The Master Plan comes out. How did this album fall for you when you heard it?
So The Master Plan, that was the compilation one, do you mean?
Yeah, but it also had like alternate versions of songs, right? Like now, some people have said The Master Plan was an excuse album because Oasis either needed to rest or maybe Noel couldn't write anymore, or people have said The Master Plan has been used as like a scapegoat album. But bands have compilations and greatest hits that comes out, and the alternate versions, like isn't I Am the Walrus on The Master Plan, like the live version?
Do you know what? You totally have got me again, because I didn't realise it was that old, that album. To me, it just feels like it was only recent. But yeah, 98. So I remember liking it because, again, we go back to saying that the B-sides were better than often the A-sides. So I think this is Noel's chance at saying, look, you think you know us, but you've only heard part of the story.
Right?
Look at the track listing. Acquiesce, which is an awesome track, right? Talk Tonight, Fade Away, I'm the Walrus, which I know it obviously is a cover, but they do it great. Listen Up, brilliant. Half the World Away, Rocking Chair, Head Shrinker, and The Master Plan, which, again, will feature in most people's favourite songs of theirs. So, again, I always say, if you think that's an excuse, just listen to it and you'll hear that if that's an excuse, then other bands have got a lot to kind of live up to, right? Do you know
right.
What I mean?
Because this is also when Oasis, I think the Oasis detractors start. I think this is when, musically speaking, the tide starts to turn on them. It's also because something happened in like the late 90s to 2000 where it was like the death of alternative and then the rise of indie. And there aren't really any mega bands anymore. Like everyone had their own specific genre that they wanted to listen to. So you started labeling all of these bands with ultra specific genres. And it's almost like the terms rock, punk, alternative, it's almost like they became poison. Because, oh, we're an indie band. Well, what kind of indie? And then it's like three descriptors and then the word rock after it. And like, I think my friend once told me, he was like, oh, I listened to the Arctic Monkeys. And then he described them as indie noise funk. And I just wanted to like push him out of the car in that moment. Like, I'm just like, at some point, we're just throwing labels on things. And I think that with this album, and we're getting to that stage in music, that this is when the Oasis detractors start. We have had 4 years of Wonderwall and Champagne Supernova and Don't Look Back in Anger. And I think that this is when people started trying to denigrate what Oasis had done in their time.
And especially over here, we like to tear down people who are at the top, right?
Right.
And I don't know why in the press and the media over here, anyone who gets successful, it feels like we got to tear it down. And
you must eat your young, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and probably at that point, they were quite brash. They were quite abrasive. There were a few, as some of the other bands did, there were a few probably ill-advised comments about narcotics that, you know, that was said. So I think that's all swirling around to be quite negative.
Didn't Liam make that salacious? He said, if I wrote Stairway to Heaven at 22, I'd be the one they were saying was the greatest instead of Jimmy Page.
And, well, they were always saying that, right? They were bigger than the Beatles. They were going to be bigger than everything. And, you know, but again, there's that swagger. It's
that Manx swagger. It's that Manchester swagger that even like Morrissey has that, you know, like the Smiths had that.
It's part of the act, right? And like I said, maybe that was back when I was 17, maybe one of the things that attracted me to it was that swagger and that confidence and that, you know, we are going to do it. We're going to be the best, you know, and they came from nowhere, you know, in terms of like a real working class kind of background to doing that, to touring the States. And again, like we said, headlining Nebworth. But yeah, I would argue if people haven't listened to the master plan, listen to it, because like I said, if anyone had only ever bought the albums, it's a crime then that they wouldn't have listened to some of the B-sides. And if it's an excuse, it's an excuse. Maybe people saw it like the compilation clip episode of a sitcom, you know, where they're running out of ideas. Again, I think they earned the right to do this.
Now, are you into bootlegs at all? Like, have you ever picked up an Oasis bootleg of like unreleased tracks or like demos of songs that were never released? Or did you ever go down that rabbit hole?
Not bootlegs as such, but I have since bought like a few of the like deluxe re-release versions where they've got demos or unreleased versions of tracks. But I've not really gone down the bootleg side of things. Not really done that for many bands, although I've got kind of like Beatles one where I can pick up, because, you know, vinyl, especially now these days, is just so expensive.
It used to be so affordable and nice, and now like can't. It's so hard to purchase affordable vinyl.
But yeah, I'll show you at some point a couple of the versions of the albums I've got, which fill me with joy. But actually, one thing they did do, and I forgot to say, and I did mean to bring them in, I'll show you after, was so they released, like I said, there's normally 4 or 5 singles released from each album. And for the first 2 albums, at some point later, they released a box to put them in, but the box was based on a cigarette box. You slot the singles into it, and I think there was a bonus CD in there. It might have been an interview CD, but then when you're looking at it, it looks like a box of, I can't remember if it was, I didn't smoke it, are they Lambert Butlers or Benson and Hedges, but it looked like a cigarette box, yeah.
That's really cool. That's something the digital era has cut out on. There's a lot of like very cool box sets or like CD cases, and I have an Alice in Chains box set, and it's like a safe. You open it up, and there's 4 CDs in it, but then the back is a false back that you have to like hit the back of, and then it falls out, and there's like poetry on the inside of it. And I have like an Alice Cooper box set. I have a few other pieces that I'm just like, you don't get that with just a download. You
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
get like the cool, like Weird Al Yankovic has a box set, but it's an accordion case that the
Okay,
vinyl
yeah, yeah,
slots
yeah, yeah, yeah,
into.
yeah.
I'm like, that's really cool. Like, if you're a collector, you're a fan of this person, yeah, pay the 130 for it or the 200 or whatever. But you just don't get that with a digital medium.
Exactly.
It's kind of sad that it's missing out on that.
Yeah, and I think you could buy it with all the singles in it if you hadn't bought them. But if you had done, it was quite a clever idea to just sell the empty box that you could then, slip them into.
Sure.
So, oh, and the other thing is, I'm not sure if I've got it somewhere. If it is, it will be in that. There was that time. Did you hear about the time they were being interviewed? The interviewer walked away, had left the tape running, and Noel and Liam just have an argument for about half an hour, and it got released as a CD. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I have that.
Oh, you've got that sibling rivalry, right?
Yes, I have it here. Oh, I don't have it here. It's back in California.
Right, yeah.
I shouldn't say I have it. My parents have it. But yes, I've heard sibling rivalry.
Yeah. And again, how brilliant is that?
Right. I have I also have I have it here in Texas with me. I have an Iron Maiden argument on tape too, like that. Like someone was left a thing running, and Steve Harris is yelling at some poor grip who did something, and they're just all bickering for 5 minutes before they realize that someone's recording them, and then the audio just quickly cuts off.
Yeah, brilliant.
So, the year 2000, Y2K comes and goes, and we all survive that, luckily. 24 years ago, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants would come out. Totally different compared to what Oasis have done, in my opinion. Like, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants seems so antagonistic to the first three albums almost. Like, it seems like they have become a different animal of a band, at least in my opinion. How did you feel about it when it came out?
I think I felt the same. I think it felt, going to sound funny, but a bit more serious, if you know what I mean. It felt not a darkness to it, but it felt like there was a bit of an edge to it that the other albums didn't have, to me. And I think this is what I said to you when I first got this. It took me a while to actually warm to it as much as the other albums did. I don't know what it is. Maybe it doesn't have the radio friendly catchy song that maybe the first few did.
I mean, it starts out with in the bushes,
which is a brilliant track. I'm going to be honest to you, I have to say though, that is a brilliant, and maybe that caught us off guard with, the use of a swear word on a track when they don't normally do that anything.
Right. Because it's also, I don't know what that audio is before it in the start of the song with the guy ranting, but like it comes out so hard-edged, it comes out so crass and loud. It has like a dirty punk vibe to it almost, and then it just gets into like really good savage guitar work. Honestly,
it's such a great track, and I think most people have heard it. I think it's been used on so many things. There's a radio station here, sports station, that one of the evening shows, they use it as the prelude. I think Liam uses it for when he comes out on stage at his gigs. But as you said, it's just such a...
There's a British wrestler named Nigel McGuinness who uses it as his theme.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Guy Ritchie used it in like 2 or 3 of his movies. And the interesting thing is, I think a lot of people have heard that song, and I don't know if they know it's Oasis or not.
Do you know what? I wouldn't disagree with you there, especially because it is an instrumental pretty much, isn't it?
More or less, yeah. And the voices on that album or on that song are not Liam or Noel. It's just like pre-sampled audio clips with instrumentation. So if you were to play that, because it also doesn't sound anything like what you're used to from the other Oasis albums.
Absolutely.
So if you were to play someone that song and go, who do you think this is? I don't think they would ever say, oh, that's Oasis.
No, I think you're right. And the other thing with this, again, it's got another one of my favourite tracks on there of theirs, so having said what I said. So I really like Go Let It Out. I think that's a great song. It's one of my my favourites. But also it's got the first, I think, credited song that Liam wrote on the album as well, Little James. Again, you've kind of got that now. So you had Noel starting to sing more, but now you've got Liam wanting to get in on the writing act, right?
Right. Now, there was a little bit of in-band controversy with this album, right?
What was that then?
Well, hasn't Noel disowned it? Like, hasn't Noel come out to speak out against Standing on the Shoulders of Giants?
I'm not sure.
I think in the years since, I think that Noel has been unkind toward this album, in his own opinion, and I think that I don't know how legitimate that is towards the album versus him and his brother just having disagreements.
Just looking here, yeah, now. So it was in 2011. He's quoted as saying they should never have made it. Yeah, so he's saying after the second album, he lost the desire to write music, and he said the band was slowly moving on his way. He said, we should never have made Standing on the Shoulder of Giants. I'd come to the end. At the time, I had no reason or desire to make music. I had no drive. We sold all these effing records, and there just seemed to be no point. Yeah.
That's really strange.
Yeah, maybe that's what lends to the vibe of the album. You know, it's...
But that's really strange considering that Noel would continue for a few albums and then he had High Flying Birds. It's strange for a guy to be like, oh, I can't write anymore. I don't want to write anymore. And then they keep writing and making music for the next 10, 12, 15 years.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at the time. I mean, for me, then, you know, the next batch of albums, so, you know, ultimately up to their ending, that came at a time of life then. So I'd met my girlfriend, moved out, work, there was financings because, you know, you're moving in, you know, you're buying a house. And I think that's when it almost seems to be mirroring maybe the fractious relationship within the band as well, that, you know, they were starting to have these troubles and I was slowly losing interest in the music side of it because of, obviously, of like I said, I remember at the time, one of the hardest things I did was I had to sell a lot of my music collection to try to raise some funds, right? And the last three albums, I think, they probably just haven't. I think at the time they weren't as appreciated. So Heath and Chemistry, Don't Believe the Truth, Dig Out Your Soul. But I think since then, again, I would say the last few years has seen me really get an appreciation for the second half of their career.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put it. Because Standing on the Shoulders of Giants really does seem like the master plan almost seems like that, and Standing on the Shoulders of Giants seems like a bridge between Oasis in the 90s and then Oasis in the thousands leading up to the breakup, right? And it's interesting that you said that the album, you have a connection where you feel like it kind of mirrors your emotional turmoil or maybe your like life turmoil. You were moving in, you had finances to worry about, so you connected these harder, grittier, more unforgiving Oasis albums that sounded a little more raw edge, that had a little bit more bite to them when you were going through a time in your life when things were a little more hard edged and had a little more bite to them. You were becoming disinterested in music, not because of choice, but because of necessity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you have to give into necessity like that, it does, oh, well, I don't like music then. It's just going to be easier to accept it. I'm just going to focus on this for now, and I can't worry about that. You don't want to do it, but you have to. Like, needs must as the devil drives, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I think that's why then when I went back to those albums later on, you know, I realised that I had done them a disservice sort of originally in kind of disregarding them, or not disregarding them, but that you kind of make that snap judgment. But when you can sit down and listen to it, like Heath and Chemistry, again, I will say it's got two of my favourite songs there. I seem to have a lot of favourite songs of theirs, but Stop Crying Your Heart Out, I think it's just beautiful. You put that on and you've all got those memories or emotions that's going to bring out of you. And I think one thing I've not said as well is Liam's voice to me is just incredible, and kind of like the emotion he can get from that raspiness he's got. And I think Stop Crying Your Heart Out is just an incredible song by him.
So 2002, Heathen Chemistry comes out, and that's Noel Gallagher is writing some of the songs, Liam is writing some of the songs, and then Jim Archer is writing some of the songs. As an Oasis fan, are you able to, when you hear these songs, do you go, oh, Liam totally wrote this, or this is an Archer track? Like, are you able to tell the songwriting differences in the approach, or does it all just kind of blend together?
It kind of all blends together, but mainly because they were doing experimental things. So there was kind of like that trippy vibe. They did some of their songs, they did almost have like the Asian influence a couple of times in the background. They were trying to influence, you know. But for me, it's mainly because Oasis is Liam's voice to me. So as long as he's singing a track, to me, it doesn't matter who's written it or if it's a ballad or if it's rocky, or it's just that I hear his voice and that's an Oasis track. I don't necessarily think about kind of who's written it. If you're talking about writing, one of the funny things is, again, I said my wife wasn't necessarily an Oasis fan, but I've turned her into one. One of her favorite tracks is actually a Liam Gallagher track, and it's Songbird, which is on this album. And again, 2 minutes is a very short song, and I think he wrote it for his partner at the time.
Sure.
All this brashness and swagger he's got, it's a lovely little, almost like a love song, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. It just shows that whatever you think about Liam Gallagher, in that moment, there was more to him than what he had been portraying to the media.
Absolutely.
What do you think about The Cage?
About the what, sorry?
The Cage. So if you listen to Better Man, and then there's that big gap, because it's listed as a 33-minute track, then there's that hidden track, which bands also used to do.
Oh, weren't they great on the CDs?
Why is this album suddenly 2 hours long and there's 45 minutes of silence before like a 3-minute track comes on at the very end of that?
To be honest, as I said, it's probably one of the tracks I've not really gone back to and listened to that much, mainly because now it was one, like I said, I'd never had originally, and then I've bought it on vinyl since, and it's one of the ones that, like I said, I've kind of just stuck to the main songs on it. So why do you bring that up? Is that because there's something for you?
So I always think it's like Nirvana had a hidden track on Nevermind. Velvet Revolver had a hidden track on the end of their second album. Whenever a band puts a hidden, an album, you have a band, they're making this album, and there's like, okay, we're going to put these songs in this order, and we're going to compose. So we're going to put this song here, and then this song, and it's the way every album is structured with a purpose. I don't care who you are musically. I don't care what your manager says. I don't care what kind of a band you are. Every album you produce, that album has a theory, that album has a process, that album has a purpose. And so when a band decides to go, okay, we're going to put on a brick of silence, 15 minutes of silence, 10 minutes of silence, 4 minutes of silence, and then a track that we're not going to list on the album, we're not going to acknowledge in the track notes, we're just going to have it be a hidden track. That is always something really special to me, because it shows the band going, there is something more to this album. Like, this is rewarding someone who listens to it from start to finish. This is rewarding someone who listens to our music like on play. This is someone who is not putting our singles in a playlist or just listening to like the edited single number one hit and then moving on. A hidden track shows a certain level of songwriting competency that goes, this is something, and like sometimes those hidden tracks are amazing. Like sometimes they're really good, they're really produced well, they're really well thought out. And every time that like one crops up that I find out about, I'm always like, that's like there's something really special there, because it's also not on every album, and it's very rare when a hidden track comes along like that.
And again, going back to what you said, that you can do this with physical media.
Right.
Well, I guess you could do it with streaming, but it loses that edge, right?
Right.
And the fact that, like I said, it's uncredited, so it takes, again, most artists want everything credited, right?
Right. So, and like you'll have like you're putting a playlist on or a pot. Like, let's say you're listening to music and you're doing dishes. You're just gonna put on like a playlist of whatever. Like, when's the last time someone sat down and go, I'm gonna listen to this album from start to finish, no skips, and I bought the album, or I'm putting it on CD, or I'm putting it on something to where I don't have to listen to commercials.
Yeah.
And then you're listening to it, and then, okay, well, that's the end of that song. That album's done. And you'd walk over and you'd change it. Or you're walking around with a little remote and your Bluetooth, or Siri, play this. Siri, play that, So to have a hidden track on an album somewhere, and then for you to hear like silence, for whatever reason, not change it because you're busy with something, and then cut to a song, it's quite jarring, because you're like, what is this? Why is this? Because then you have to track, well, why is there music here? And it doesn't say anything on the album. And you just have to, listen to it enough and do a little bit of digging. And, oh, that's the name of this song. And that's a hidden track. And, then you can find out stuff. But it's such an interesting road to get to that point.
And I could be misremembering, but I'm sure I'm not. I'm sure there were CDs as well where there were tracks at the start. So if you put the CD in and then rewound it, you would have a track hidden before the first track.
Yeah, but you could only access it through the rewind
Yes.
process.
Yeah. So this old media had some very cool functions.
The Beatles did that too. They would put hidden tracks in the end of the records. So like the actual record went in and then would hit the end grooves and then music would play.
Yeah. There's also, I've not got one. I would love to get one because I like to try get various types of vinyl, but there are ones where they've got two grooves. So, because I remember somebody reading an article, somebody said there's an album they listened to, and then once they went to play it and it was different, the intro was different. It's because it had a different groove. It is where you put the needle, the stylus onto the record.
Oh,
so there were two tracks.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, and like when we're talking about experimental music, and this is a slight digression, we'll get back to Oasis, but the Flaming Lips made an entire album, but every piece of music was isolated, and then it was up to you, the listener, to listen to whatever. You could listen to the drums and the guitars, or the vocals and the bass, or you could listen to them all compiled, and then you'd actually hear the songs as they were meant to be played.
Right, okay,
or they left it up to you to just mix match your own tracks and vocals and everything to however you want it.
It's so cool, isn't it? You can have this experimentation with something that's
right,
well, centuries old music. I mean, and the format. Yeah.
Now, with Heathen Chemistry, did you feel like Oasis were, because no one saw the end coming, and this is getting close to there, we're 2 albums out from the breakup. So with Heathen Chemistry, did this over there, across the pond in jolly old England, what did this album do for Oasis, for you guys? Did it reinvent them? Did it keep them the same? Or were England kind of over Oasis at this point?
I think it was, it was almost like, it sounds dramatic, but the beginning of the end for it. I think, as you said, times changed. So it's 2002. So like you said, we're in the, in the new millennium, tech coming through. And if I remember right and looking at it, it got really mixed reviews. So, I mean, I think it's averaging around 50 out of 100. So
how did it fall for you?
Like I said, I think it just felt different. It didn't feel like it was, it's going to sound funny, like my Oasis. And my Oasis was the first couple of albums. Like I said, for me, it's those first 3 albums will always be sort of my happy place for Oasis, if you know what I mean. But like I said, that's not so I haven't come to love the later albums and that there's brilliant tracks on there. And like I said, I don't know if it's just the time in my life where priorities have changed as well. But it just didn't feel like the Oasis of old.
So that was 2002. Now we have a gap because gone are the days when Oasis are, like Noel and Liam are on speaking terms and they're cranking out an album every half a year, 2 years.
Yeah.
So Don't Believe the Truth would come out May 30th, 2005. How are you doing in 2005? Was that a good year for Dan?
2005. No, so I'm trying to think now. So I think around 2005, 2006. I'm sure I'm going to get the date wrong here, but that was around the time. So me and my wife, we were working at the same company. It was really my first job, and I think that was when the company was shutting down, or it was relocating, and we were taking redundancy. So like I said, there was whole sort of things going on. So I think this is where I started to part ways with them even more.
Sure. Your life really has been tethered to Oasis in a strange way.
Yeah, because when I look at it again, as you intimated on the last one, it's very much an album of everybody getting involved in it, right? It's a shorter album as well, but it's got a couple of really interesting ones on there. So you've got Lila, which I think is a really interesting one, and also The Importance of Being Idle, which I remember when I first heard it, didn't like it, but then on the second and third hearing, I just thought what a great track it was. And I don't know if you've seen it. It's got what's his name? Is it Reese fans in the video? It's a black and white video, and again, it's them doing a bit of almost like a proper video. So it was a weird album for me because I think this is where I think I was losing more interest in my passion for buying everything music and listening. I think I was devoting less time to music at that time in my life. Yeah.
So something interesting happens here with "Don't Believe the Truth" because the next album, it's a greatest hits. It Stop the Clocks. So
Oh yeah,
Stop the
yeah.
Clocks came out. It's a greatest hits album. That's fine. Which further, if the Master Plan is a greatest hits album, then what's Stop the Clocks? You know, Stop the Clocks is the greatest hits. Master Plan is a chance to show off the B sides that people weren't buying. So Stop the Clocks comes out, and if you look at the track listing for Stop the Clocks, I feel like Oasis kind of knew where their bread and butter is at because most of that comes from the first 3 or 4 albums. It's like you have a few from Heathen Chemistry or Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, but most of it's coming from the first 3 years, you know?
And sorry, while you were saying that, yeah, I was just double checking. So yeah, my first job, yeah, was finished in May. And then I was bouncing between a couple of roles. So I went to another role and then there was redundancy there. So it was just to say that was, I think, where it kind of explains why I was jumping away. But sorry, but you were saying, yeah, about the compilation album.
Right. It's the greatest hits. And most of the album, it's the early songs, it's the early years, you know? Which there's nothing more telling than a greatest hits album than when the majority of it comes from the first like 3 or 4 albums.
Yeah, and was the writing on the wall for them then? Did they know that their star was waning, as it were? Was that, like you said, was that an attempt to kind of recapture that? I mean, I've got the album. Again, I've pretty much bought all of their
Sure.
things. And again, the greatest hits, I mean, what is it, 2004? So I guess it's 10 years on, isn't it? So just 10 years on. So it
The
probably
greatest
does.
hits released November 20th, 2006.
Oh, 2006. So what's that? That is 12 then years, isn't it? From the first album. The first album we said was 94, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're justified, or you're allowed to get away with a compilation album then, I think, aren't
Sure.
you?
So have you seen Oasis again since Nebwith at this point? In like 2006, was there another time that you ran into them, met them, or saw them live?
No, but I've got actually a funny story, which I'll come on to after, which links into my first job. I'll mention that after. But no, do you know what? I never saw them again, which is why I'm actually quite gutted that I haven't got tickets for this. But I did then see Liam twice in 2022.
Okay, all right. Wait, Liam. What was Liam's band? Or
No,
was
so
this
it's
just a
his solo
solo?
career. Yeah, it's
Okay.
his solo career. So he was touring, obviously, and in the Royal Albert Hall each year is the Teenage Cancer Trust. They do a week long worth of concerts there. So I think they've had The Who there, they've had Paul Weller, and 22, he was doing one of the nights. So me and my wife bought tickets to see him there. Then after that was announced, he then announced his Nebworth. So he played a couple of nights at Nebworth himself, only 80,000 a night.
What a shame.
Yeah, and I said to my wife, "No, we can't do it because we got tickets for that." She said, "No, we have to do it. We have to do it." And yeah, I got tickets for Nebworth as well, and it was great because within the space of a few months, saw him in. I'm not going to call the Royal Albert Hall like an intimate venue, but it was within an indoor.
Enclosed,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and then saw him back at the scene of Nebworth. But the difference with that one was I managed to get VIP tickets. Well, they were the only tickets available. I'm not going to lie, and they weren't overly expensive. But I remember the funny thing was that they didn't say anything other than it got you the VIP ticket. There was a separate section off the main bit where you could go. It's almost like a chill out bit. There was a couple of bars that only the VIP members could do, and there's a couple of portaloos there that only the VIP members could do it. And I remember a friend of mine went the night before, and I said to him, he said his friend had VIP tickets. And I said, was there anywhere specific you could stand? So, I'm just trying to think, could you get close to the stage? He said, no,
Sure.
there wasn't anything like that. And I thought, that's fair enough. Anyway, me and my wife go the next day. Now, this is what I was saying. So we didn't go early on, so we went later on. And I didn't really know the warm-up bands they were having or the support bands. But I did go in time for Kasabian, who again are another one where I've heard the
Oh.
songs and I've liked the songs. But then to see them perform live, it was just something else. And the crowd was literally pumped up. It was just great. And it's now it's led by what's his name, Sergio now. And he was just, again, if you talk about enigmatic frontman and just getting that crowd whipped up, they did it right. We drive in, we get there late, and I was worried that we were going to have a nightmare parking and it was going to be difficult getting. It was quiet all the way. And we were like, have they closed it? Have they cancelled the event? There was no traffic. Anyway, drove straight in, parked without issue, got straight in. We managed to cut our way right to because the VIP section, because we said, let's go get a drink there. We managed to cut through the whole crowd early on, got all the way through. And then we got a really good standing space. We were fairly close to the stage, quite a good bit for Kasabian. Then I just caught the corner of my eye. There was, so we were by a railing where they had a walkway for, I think, like to keep people a little bit of separation, space, and for security to walk through. And I saw a security guard with I could see he was standing in front of a bit of paper, and I was trying to see, it was just like an A4 bit of paper. I was thinking, what is that? What is that? And he moved briefly and it said VIP. And so we got his attention and he comes over and I said, that section, what's that? And he goes, it's for VIP. He goes, have you got a VIP ticket? I lifted my hand up. He goes, what are you doing there? He goes, come around here. As we were pretty much front and center of the stage. We were right up.
Fantastic.
Yeah, just
that is so good.
Yeah. And that was just brilliant because whilst it's his solo stuff, he sang a lot of Oasis tunes, and it was just a mix of older people like me, but they were bringing their young kids to it as well.
Sure.
So it was a proper mix. And it was just people just really living the moment. It was just incredible. It was almost, I think I was able to enjoy that one more because the original Nebworth, I was young, I was 18, just really hyped up. And I think this one, because of the memories of the original Nebworth and see my wife enjoying the concert as well, because I didn't know her then, the original Nebworth. It was just it was a great vibe for that too, yeah.
Now, 2008, Dig Out Your Soul. I mean, the end of Oasis. And I don't think that, like, didn't the breakup happen, like, unexpectedly, right? It was like everyone went to sleep one day and it's like Oasis are here, and they woke up and it's like Oasis breakup, Gallagher Brothers forever, So Dig Out Your Soul, was that a concept album or am I misremembering?
No, I'm not sure it was. Again, like I said, this is the album I've got the least affinity to, I think, because again, maybe because they broke up again.
Sure.
For us, it broke the next day, as it were,
right.
Because I just wanted to go back to that, what you were saying. It's because it was always, they were always fighting, right? They were always fighting. I think you just accepted they were going to fight, but it was never going to be anything serious. And then, obviously this happened. And I remember, even though, like I said, the last few albums and Dig Out Your Soul, at the time I never bought, but I've subsequently got a really nice version of it. Yeah, it kind of knocked me back because I was thinking, no, but they're supposed to fight. They're supposed to get on with it.
Right. I'm a Black Crowes fan. I'm used to the band breaking up for years at a time because the brothers are fighting. I'm used to that. So when Oasis broke up, and also they'd had their fights before and they'd done their own thing. So when I remember Oasis breaking up, I'm like, they'll get back together in like a month, or they'll get back in 3 years. I was not. I was like, I guess Oasis are really broken up.
Yeah.
So Dig Out Your Soul comes out, and this is an interesting album because it's nothing new. It's on that same psychedelic track as Don't Believe the Truth or Heathen Chemistry. It almost seems like Oasis are in their new sound with this mix of like psychedelic hard rock. It's just the way this is Oasis are going to be. And you can argue the Beatles thing and that whole influence. But it seems like such a... depressing is the wrong word, but it seems like such a depressing album from a band that if you followed from the early years and then you get to Dig Out Your Soul and it's like, all the happiness from these guys drained away.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. It's probably, again, what I was thinking at the time. It's definitely a marked difference, and I'm not saying a band can evolve, absolutely, but the fact that this culminated with their breakup, I think, shows that it's not necessarily just an evolution of sound. It's more of an expression of what's going on, right?
Right. And I think it was Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses who said when they covered Sympathy for the Devil, Duff McKagan said, if you want to know what a band's breaking up sounds like, go and listen to that song. Because it's nothing like what Guns N' Roses would be, should be, or could be. And
Mm.
I think that when a band is going through a breakup or just about to break up and you listen to the last song they released or the last album, it always sounds fractured. It always sounds kind of manic. And it doesn't ever really sound like an album in the throes of stability. And I think Dig Out Your Soul is that album for Oasis, and because they
Yeah.
were looming on the edge of this tension and there was tension between each other, they'd been doing it for over 10 years by this point, and they'd hit the peak and they kind of declined, and then we had the big wave of indie come up, like Coldplay, Kings of Leon, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
Oasis's cachet is being like Franz Ferdinand too, and I think Oasis's cachet of being like, oh, the little like Britpop band who blew up the world had been detracted, and then it had been kind of made a mockery of because of Wonderwall and over the years, and it kind of became considered stale, and the thousands wanted nothing to do with the 90s because it was trying to reinvent itself musically. And I think that Dig At Your Soul gets caught in that unfortunate web of like a band who were trying to hold it together, they weren't going to hold it together, and the fans really suffered because it's not an album that you want. It's not the best of Oasis on that album, for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, as we said, right, they burst onto the scene and they took the world by surprise. And the 2000s was a very different place, wasn't it, from the mid 90s? Maybe they were a band trapped, maybe no one
Sure.
wanted to start expressing himself, but people just wanted that those stadium anthems, that stadium rock. I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, right, with
Right.
your innovating it. And like we said right at the start, pick any band, right? You could play a song and I can tell you that's say an REM song or whatever, but Oasis got criticized for being the same. But then when they tried to experiment, it was like, well, that's not Oasis. Now,
Right.
they also did lose a couple of members. They went through a lot in those last few albums, I think.
Right.
It's an interesting history, I think.
And this was funny too because I pitched this conversation to you about initially, I don't know, a month and a half ago. And then about 4 weeks ago, you messaged me. You're like, hey, whatever your energy you're bringing, keep it up because there's rumors that Oasis are getting back together. And I told my girlfriend, I told Alicia, I'm like, apparently there are rumors that Oasis are getting back together. And then, like a fool, I said, I don't think it'll ever happen. And then the next day, it was Oasis reunion. I'm like, oh, well, guess what we're spending money on? And then, the tour dates came out, and I'm like, of course they're not playing America. Fine. Like,
I think they will. I'm actually quite gutted. I always said I've said that I've not really gone to many gigs, and the main ones I've gone to are Oasis and 2 Liam Gallagher ones, right? But I always said
weren't into Noel's High Flying Birds at all? You weren't into Noel's
Do you know
solo
what?
work?
No, I didn't really get into high flying birds. And again, no, I think it was that period of time. So even BDI, Liam's, that one album he did with BDI, I didn't really get that. But his solo stuff, I think was him back on top form. I really love his solo stuff. And I would never have thought back in the early days that if they broke up, that Liam would probably go on to the more success or be the more
Sure.
popular one, because it was Noel writing all the songs, right? Yeah, I always said I would go back to that would be the concert I wanted to go to. And obviously we've just had the Taylor Swift a time recording Taylor Swift Eras tours, and there's a colleague at work, she went to that, and I said to her, this is like my Eras tour. This is that I must get. Now, yeah, I was so gutted. I missed out on, I didn't get picked for the pre-sale. So then the next day, it was a Saturday, I was in a queue for 4 hours just to get onto Ticketmaster. And then when I got on, I was 280,000th in the queue.
Yeah.
Took me about another 4 hours to get through. And then by the time I did, it was, I don't know if you heard all the furore, but
Yeah.
they've got dynamic pricing, and the tickets that were offered to me were pretty much £500 each, which I couldn't do.
Sure. And I've tried to explain this to a few people because I was going to go see Aerosmith. And I was like looking for everywhere, and I finally found a set of tickets. I found a ticket. I was like, yeah. But I've seen Aerosmith 7 times before. So I was like, okay, they're doing their goodbye tour. I'm going to see Aerosmith. Bought tickets, and then I was like, okay, I'm not going to pay more than, I don't know, 500. I can't do that because I've seen Aerosmith before. I never saw Aerosmith in the 70s, obviously, but I know that they have a top value. And like every band, and I don't care if they're your favorite band or not, every single band has a top dollar value. I'm sorry, Roger Waters, you are not worth $5,000. You're not. Maybe if it was all of Pink Floyd original members, maybe, but even then, that's rough. There is no band that is worth 5,000, and depending on like a band like Oasis or REM, if REM ever get back together. And I'm saying that because if I can make Oasis get back together, I want REM to get back together. So if REM get back together, I know they have a top dollar too. And yeah, I was reading it all on Twitter, like you were talking about it, and a few other people I follow were like talking about the queue, and I was watching Ticketmaster just melt down. I was like, this is bad. I don't think anyone's going to get tickets from this. And then the people who were paying, crazy amounts of money, and I'm like, as much as I like Oasis, I don't know if they're worth that much. No, especially the Oasis you're going to see now. They're not the Oasis you're thinking of then.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? And I always say, look, you do you. If you're going to pay that, you pay that. But, I was just looking at that. I was thinking, if I bought 2 tickets, that's a vacation somewhere.
So that's a vacation. That's a house payment. That's,
yeah. As you say, yeah. I mean, look, I've seen Liam, and I know if anything, I think his voice is probably better now. Look, it's a stadium concert. They do a concert. They don't do a show. So we mentioned Taylor Swift. Look, by all accounts, she puts on a 3-hour show, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I just couldn't. So, yeah, and then last week they announced some extra dates for those who didn't get them the first time around, but I didn't get selected for that. So again, it's just disappointment. But the way I see it, I'm actually kind of saying, look, I saw them in '96. That was I think the moment to have seen them.
Yes.
I've seen Liam twice, and for my wife, she says to her anyway, Oasis is Liam. So we've kind of had the experience, but
right, you've seen, yeah.
But if anyone's got tickets at face value, let me know.
Yeah. Please get. Dan deserves to see Oasis 25. Dan deserves it.
I'm holding out. They've said no, but I'm holding out that they will.
Well, you don't know, right? You can just give them a call.
Well, yeah. I'm going to say something else shortly, which is will make you laugh, but I'm holding out that they'll do Nebworth in 26 because that will then be 30 years.
Sure.
From the original.
That'd be a good anniversary tour.
But the funny thing I was going to say is, so I mentioned the first job I was at, which had parallels with Oasis, because losing being made redundant, etc. And at the time of recording tomorrow night, I'm actually meeting up with some people from there because it's like, I think it's like 20 years or whatever since we've worked there. So we're going out for dinner, and one of the things that, I remember, and it caught me off guard, I remember seeing a story about Liam a few years ago, and it was talking about his girlfriend. The name rang a bell, and I think it's his wife now and manager, I worked with at that first company years ago. She worked at that company. She came in as I think she may have been a temp, or she was very new, and she worked in the same area as my wife. And, and it's one of those things, that obviously you lose touch and things change. But yeah, I was just thinking,
if she shows up to the dinner tomorrow.
If only we'd still be in touch. But yeah, I remember, it's funny because, she was such a nice person.
So this whole podcast is just a giant PSA. Be nice to your temps.
Yeah, there you
don't
go.
know who they are.
Well, the motto I live by is always be nice to everyone that you meet. But yeah, no, so it's just, again, it was another funny link to Oasis and how it's kind of always been part of my life for the last sort of 30 years. Yeah.
In one way or another, you have been weirdly connected to Oasis in a direct way.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Look, to sum it up for me again, were they the most original band? No, but again, originality is subjective, and give it a try. Listen to those B-sides, listen to the compilations, and I think it's harsh when people say they didn't change, because they did, but I just don't think people accepted it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if nowadays it would have been more of an audience for it. I don't know.
I think now, if more people were willing to go back, I think Dig Out Your Soul would be considered a better album than what it was at the time.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, well, thank you for making me go down memory lane.
Yeah, no, this was... I had a goal and mission accomplished. I love that, like, we were able to walk through your life with Oasis, and I think it's awesome that you got to see. Like, I didn't know you saw the Nebworth. That's been great. That's like that's an iconic concert. It's up there with like U2's Zoo TV tour in Australia. Like,
and you know what? That was my first concert. That was my first gig as well.
That's such a good concert. That is such a good concert. That's a good first. My first is so lackluster compared. But they all have a meaning, right? And like I said, it's that's why if they could do Nebworth in 2 years' time, that would be fate, and that will mean I'm getting the tickets for that. I think that's what that... Noel, if you're hearing this, your friend Dan, you met him once in Sorrento.
I was polite to you.
Yeah, he was polite to you. Please send him a ticket, him and his lovely wife. They'd love to see you again.
Oh dear. Well, look, I think it's been a great conversation. I know as soon as I press stop on this, I'm going to remember a couple of stories I probably should have shouted out to you. So I think you said it, but what's your Oasis then?
It's What's the Story, Morning Glory. Like, it's from my youth. It's the tape that got played the most. And it's the album I have the fondest memories of, in the same way that, like, Dirt from Alice in Chains is up there, The Fun-Loving Criminals is up there, the Beastie Boys. It was just a tape that got played a lot, and the people that my mom worked with, because I was an only child, and she was a single mother. So it was like, well, I have to be able to take Griffin with me. And sometimes mom's coworkers were younger. So while mom was getting me hooked into the B-52s, the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, her coworkers were getting me into Primus, Nine Inch Nails, Ministry, Oasis, Jane's Addiction, Primus, so Faith No More. And there are just some albums and bands that I remember from those keystone moments in my youth where I'm like, that's the 90s to me. Yeah, and What's the Story, Morning Glory? Throughout the years, I've seen people, talking about Oasis, and I saw them become the mega band, and then I saw them break up, and I lived through all that. And I remember, like, man, say what you will, but What's the Story, Morning Glory is a really hard album to beat. I feel the same way about Octane Baby from U2. Like, I love that album. I like U2, up and down the albums they have, but Octane Baby, I think, is an album that if more people sat down and listened to it, they'd be like, oh, this is why they're as big as they are. God, I understand now.
Well, if they do tour the States, and if they tour near you and you fancy going, let me know if you are going to go. Let me know if you've got a spare room. And
Yep, most definitely. Most definitely. We will have you guys come on over. We're near Austin, which is a big concert state.
Okay,
so,
there you
go. It's then we can do a live podcast in person. We can live stream the concert.
There you go. And we'll do our own bootleg as well then.
Yeah, we'll do our own bootleg.
The reboot leg Oasis concert. There you go. We'll see the name. Right,
casting reboots.
Yeah, there you go. Look, I have to say thank you very, very much, because it's not often I get to talk about something like that for as long as I have. And yeah, it's definitely brought back a lot of good memories. So yeah, firstly, thank you for that. I have to get you back on the show. Like I said, I think you're just incredible to speak to. Yeah, we're going to get you on for more about you, though. So you've turned the tables. That's it. That's your one. You get that one.
Who was the other one to turn the tables?
Game Club Pod, and they did a sub-series called Between Two Pods where they would interview the podcast. Yeah. And so, yeah, I was on. Actually, I've been on that twice. So, yeah, I let Slade on that get me twice. Yeah, that's it. Okay. You've had your one. But yeah, before you go, do you just want to shout out your Twitch stream and anything else that you want to shout out while you can?
Sure, yes. So you can find the official podcast, the Reboot Deboot podcast, on Stitcher, Good Pods, Apple, Anchor, wherever podcasts live, and that is a movie review podcast where my friend and I watch movies and their remakes and reboots, and then we discuss them side by side, analyze them, compare and contrast them. If you're interested in me more personally, I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/the Renegade Jester, and I'm on there every Monday through Thursday, sometimes Fridays, sometimes Saturdays, and I mainly play video games. I'm going to start doing cooking streams. I have a few ideas for I host writers' rooms on there too, and then the self-published books, which I will give my gracious host Dan here the links to, and you guys can read those if you're interested.
Yeah, and also, if you haven't, go back to listen to the Mind Wipe episode, and I'll probably link that as well, because that is just such a great listen to that Griffin appeared on. So, look, Griffin, thank you again, and thank you for entertaining me with talking about this for so long. I will end by saying, yeah, so you're listening to me, so you know where to hear the pod, but if you want to get hold of me, or you want to suggest a theme, or you want to appear on a Mind Wipe or a dinner party, or do something like this, you want to grill me about one of my other passions or likes like Griffin has, yeah, just search for Casting Views across all social media, and I will see you next time for another episode of Casting Views.
If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, take what we've got, 'cause you need it. Don't make us get